Hi, Freddie. I'm going to read the second chapter in our great book that we just got, and it's called "The Lion, the Witch in the Wardrobe." And remember, we just found out that we actually have some brand new characters into the story, and one's Lucy. She's the youngest, and then there's Edmund, who's the second youngest. He's the boy, and then there's Susan, who's the oldest girl, and then there's Steve, who happens to be uh, yes, Steve. Uh, Sorry, where am I at? I just read it this morning to you, and yet I can't even remember the other boy's name. Peter. Peter is the oldest, and those four kids are brothers and sisters. And this set back in World War One, where and also in Europe when there's a lot of bombing going on, and so that people would send their children out into the country away from the big cities because they were afraid that they'd be bombed and the kids would be killed. So they would send them off to live with a relative, and their parents sent them to live with an older uncle that lives by himself, and he only has a couple servants, and this house is huge. And I remember that when we in chapter 1 they decided to go exploring, and where we left off is they were exploring in the house, and Lucy wanted to stay back and explore what was in the wardrobe. I mean, remember, a wardrobe is like a big closet, but it's actually a piece of furniture. um, it's so it's like a big box that you could hang your clothes in, and it's a piece of furniture. And Lucy went in there because she loved the feeling of furs and stuff on her skin, and she kept going back and back, half expecting to find the back of the wardrobe, but she never found it. She went in and she actually found out that she was at night in the woods with snow on the ground. And she also came across a creature that was half boy or half man and half goat. He had, from the waist up, he was a man, and from the waist down, he actually was a goat. So that's quite strange, hey? Um, but chapter 2 is entitled "What um, What Lucy Found There." And once again, stick it filled with post-it notes if you do not know what meaning of or anything like that. And if I find a tricky word, I will let you know what I think the meaning is. Okay, so let me read what Lucy found there. "Good evening," said Lucy, but the fawn was too busy picking up its parcels at first it did not reply. When it had um, finished, it made her a little bow. Good evening," said the fawn. "Excuse me, I don't want to be inquisitive, but should I be right in thinking that you are the daughter of Eve?" "My name's Lucy," she said, not quite understanding him. "But you are, forgive me, you are what we call a girl," said the fawn. I don't know if you're religious or not, but I think he was referring back to Adam and Eve was a woman. And so the fawn was saying, another way of saying, "You're a human." Um, "Of course I'm a girl," said Lucy. "You are, in fact, human." "Of course I'm human," said Lucy, still a little puzzled. To be sure," said the fawn. "How stupid of me. But I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before. See, I was right. They are talking about Adam and Eve. Um, I am delighted that is to say," and then he stopped as if he had been going to say something it had not intended but had remembered in time. "Delighted, delighted," it went on. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tumminus. I am very pleased to meet you, Tumminus, said Lucy. And may I ask, O Lucy, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumminus, how you have come into Narnia? Narnia? What's that? Said Lucy. This is the land of Narnia, said Fawn, where we are now. All that lies between the lamppost and the great castle um, of Care, Perivale, on the eastern sea. And you have come from the wild woods of the west. I got through the wardrobe in the spare room, said Lucy. Oh, said Mr. Tumminus in a rather melancholy voice. If I only had worked harder at, ge- geography when I was a little fawn, I should no doubt know all about those strange countries. It is too late now. But they aren't countries at all, said Lucy, almost laughing. It's only just back there. At least, I'm not sure. It's summer there. Meanwhile, said Mr. Frog, it is winter at Narnia, and has been for ever so long, and we shall both catch cold if we stand here talking about it now. Daughter of Eve, from the land of spare room, where eternal summers reigns around the bright city of the wardrobe, how would it be if you came and had tea with me? Thank you very much, Mr. Temenus, said Lucy, but I'm wondering whether I ought to be getting back. It's only just around the corner, said the Fawn, and there'll be a roaring fire and toast and sardines and cake. Well, it's very kind of you, said Lucy, but I shouldn't be able to stay long. If you will take my arm, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Temenus, I shall be able to hold the umbrella um, over both of us. That's the way now. Off we go. And so Lucy found herself walking through the woods arm in arm with a strange creature, as if they've known each other all their lives. They had not gone far before they came to a place where the ground became rough and there were rocks all about, and little hills up and little hills down. At the bottom of one small valley, Mr. Temenus turned suddenly aside, as if he were going to walk straight into an unusually large rock. But at the last moment, Lucy found he was leading her into the entrance of a cave. As soon as they were inside, she found herself blinking in the light of the wood fire. Then Mr. Temenus stooped and took a flaming piece of wood from out of the fire, and with a neat little pair of tongs, and lit a lamp. Now we shan't be long, he said, and immediately put the kettle on. Lucy thought she had never been in a nicer place. It was a little dry, clean cave of reddish stone with a carpet on the floor and two little chairs, one for me and one for a friend, said Mr. Temenus, and a table and a dresser and a mantelpiece over the fire, and above that a picture of an old fawn with a gray beard. In one corner there was a door, which Lucy thought must lead to Mr. Temenus' bedroom, and on one wall was a shelf full of books. Lucy looked at those while he was setting up the tea things. They had titles like The Life and Letters of Silas, or Nyms and Their Ways, or Men, Monks, and Gamekeepers. A study of popular legend, or man or myth, is man or myth. Now, daughter of Eve, said Fawn, and really it is a wonderful tea. Did I skip a page? No, I didn't. And Really, it was a wonderful tea. There was a nice brown egg, lightly boiled, for each of them, and their sardines on toast, and then buttered toast, and then toast with honey, and then a sugar topped cake. And then Lucy was tired of eating. The fawn began to talk. He had wonderful tales to tell of life in the forest. He told about the midnight dances and how the nymphs who lived in the wells and the dryads who live in the trees came out to dance with the fawns, about long hunting parties after the milk white stag who could give you wishes if you caught him, and of feasting and treasure seeking with the wild red dwarfs in the deep mines of the caverns far beneath the forest floor. And then about summer, when the woods were green, and old Silas on his fat donkey would come to visit them, and sometimes Baracus himself, and then the streams would run with wine instead of water, and the whole forest would give itself up for jollifications for weeks on end. Not that it isn't always winter now, he added grimly. Not that it is always winter now, he added grimly. Then, to cheer himself up, he took out from its case on the dresser a strange little flute that looked as if it were made of straw, and began to play. And the tune he played made Lucy want to cry and laugh and dance and go to sleep all at the same time. It must have been hours later when she shook herself and said, "Mr. Timorous, I am sorry to stop you, and I do love the tune. But really, I must go home. I only meant to stay a few minutes." "It's no good now, you know," said the frog, laying down its flute and shaking its head at her very sorrowfully. "No good?" said Lucy, jumping up and feeling rather frightened. "What do you mean?" "I've got to get home at once. The others will be wondering what happened to me." But a moment later she asked Mr. Thomas whatever is the matter, for the fawn's brown eyes had filled with tears, and then the tears began trickling down its cheeks, and soon they were running off the end of his nose, and at least it covered the face with at last he covered its face with his hands and began to howl. Mr. Temenus," said Lucy in great distress, don't. What is the matter? Aren't you well? Dear Mr. Temenus, do not tell me what is wrong. But the fawn, do tell me what is wrong. But the fawn continued sobbing as if his heart would break. And even when Lucy went over and put her arms around him and lent him her handkerchief, he did not stop. He merely took the handkerchief and kept on using it, wringing it out with both hands whenever it got too wet, or to be or be more or any more use, so that precisely Lucy was standing in a damp patch. Mr. Tumnus howled Lucy in his ears, shaking him. "Do stop! Stop at once! You ought to be ashamed of yourself. A great big fawn like you! What on earth are you crying about?" "Oh," sobbed Mr. Tumnus. "I'm crying because I'm such a bad fawn." "I don't think you're a bad fawn at all," said Lucy. "I think that you are a very good fawn. You are the nicest fawn I've ever met." "Oh, you aren't saying that if you knew," replied Mr. Temenus between the sobs. "No, I'm a bad fawn. I didn't suppose there ever was a worse fawn since the beginning of the world." "What? But what have you done?" said Lucy. "My old father, now," said Mr. Temenus. "That's his picture over the mantelpiece. He would never have done a thing like this." "A thing like what?" said Lucy. "Like what I've done," said the fawn. "Taken service under the White Witch. There's what I am. I'm in the pay of the White Witch." "The White Witch? Who is she?" Why, it is she that has got all Narnia under her thumb. It is she that makes it always winter and never Christmas. Think of that. How awful, said Lucy. But what does she pay you for? That's the worst of it, Mr. Temenus said with a deep groan. I'm I'm a kidnapper for her. That's what I am. Look at me, daughter of Eve. Would you believe that I'm the sort of known a fawn to meet a poor innocent child in the woods, one that had never been done me any harm, and pretend to be friendly with it, and invite it home to my cave, all for the sake of luring it asleep, and then handing it over to the white witch. No, said Lucy. I'm sure you wouldn't do anything of that sort. But I have, said the fawn. Well, said Lucy, rather slowly, for wanting to be truthful and to yet not be too hard on him. Well, that is pretty bad. But you're so sorry for it that I'm sure that you will never be do it again. Daughter of Eve, don't you understand? Said the fawn. It isn't something I have done. I am doing it now, this very moment. What do you mean? Cried Lucy, turning very white. You are the child, said Temenus. I had orders from the White Witch that if I ever saw a son of Adam or daughter of Eve in the woods, that I was to catch them and hand them over to her. And you are the first I ever met. And I've pretended to be your friend and ask you to tea. And all the time I've been meaning to wait till you were asleep and then go and tell her. Oh, but you won't, Mr. Temenus, said Lucy. You won't, will you? Indeed, you really mustn't. And if I don't, he said, beginning to cry again, she's sure to find out, and she'll have my tail cut off, and my horns shone off, and my beard plucked out. She'll wave her hand over my beautiful cloaked hoofs and turn them into horrid solid hoofs, like the weird horses. And if she is extra and especially angry, she'll turn me into stone, and I shall be only a statue of a fawn in her horrible house until the four thrones of Perivale are filled. And goodness knows when that will happen, or whether it will ever happen at all. I'm very sorry, Mr. Temenus, said Lucy, but please let me go home. Of course I will, said the fawn. Of course I've got to. I see that now. I haven't known what humans were like before I met you. Of course I can't get give you up to the witch. Not now that I know you, but we must be off at once. I'll see you back to the lamppost. I suppose you can find your way back from there, back to the spare room and the wardrobe. I'm sure I can, said Lucy. We must go as quickly as we can, said Mr. Terminus. The whole wood is full of her spies, and even some of the trees are on her side. They both got up and left the tea things on the table, and Mr. Terminus once more put up his umbrella and gave Lucy his arm, and they went into the snow. The journey back was not at all like the journey to the fawn's cave. They strolled along as quickly as they could, without speaking a word, and Mr. Temenus kept to the darkest places. Lucy was relieved when they reached the lamppost again. Do you know your way from here, daughter of Eve? Said Temenus. Lucy looked very hard between the trees and could just see in the distance a patch of light that looked like daylight. Yes, she said, I can see the wardrobe door. Then be off home as quickly as you can, said the fawn, and Can you ever forgive me for what I meant to do? Why, of course I can, said Lucy, shaking her heartily by the hand. And I do hope you won't get into dreadful trouble on my account. Farewell, daughter of Eve, he said. Perhaps I may keep the handkerchief. Rather, said Lucy, and then ran towards the far off patch of daylight as quickly as her legs could carry her. And precisely, instead of rough branches brushing past her, she felt coats, and instead of crunching sand under her feet, she felt wooden boards. And all at once, she found herself jumping out of the wardrobe into the same empty room from which the whole adventure had started. She shut the wardrobe door tightly behind her and looked around. Um, Panting from breath, it was still raining, and she could hear the voices of the others in the passage. I'm here, she shouted. I'm here. I've come back. I'm all right. Wow. So that was chapter 2. That kind of almost seemed like she was the end of the story, but I highly doubt it. I bet you her brothers would be adventurous and go back and try to um, find the place that's going on. Okay. I'll be interested to see in the next couple chapters.